Hello everybody, I hope you're doing well as usual. In this video I want to dedicate some time to talk about the Kundalini rising, which is something that as you get into the spiritual path you start hearing about and you start reading experiences of what this means, and I think there are beautiful ways to talk about what's happening here for the person who is having a spiritual awakening. And I have broken down this into several elements that I want you to relate with and to understand from a reasonable point of view. And I have to start with the first, which is the intention. Let's set the intention for what we're going to explore here. We know that when we talk about the transcendent unity of being, when we talk about God or divinity, we are speaking about something that is unexplainable to us, and yet it is something that is right now, right here, permeating everything. That is, as far as we can experience, awareness. Awareness is that which is something that we cannot explain, and it permeates everything. It's what's creating our experience. Awareness is the principle. So we're going to explore this from the point of view of awareness. What's happening is awareness dynamics, so to speak. So with that intention in place, let's talk about the energy system, which we know as chakras or energy centers. These are very helpful and useful ways to look at our experience because they describe different aspects of awareness. That's all that the energy system or energy centers are. They are points of awareness, and we can relate to those. Now, I'm not going to make a full description of what all the energy centers are. That would be for a particular video, and I've done that in several ones in my channel. So what I'm going to say is that the energy system starts from the bottom and of course ends at the top, and this is a flow of energy that is experience being processed or awareness processing experience in a linear way, if you will. So that's what the energy system stands for. There are different states of consciousness or focuses of consciousness, awareness, and it starts with survival and then with the transcendent being, which is beyond any experience. All experience is contained within these 7 energy centers. Now, when we talk about the Kundalini, we're talking about the meeting place of 2 energies, and the first energy is that which comes through, which I like to call just everyday experience. It's prana, is that which is feeding awareness, and awareness begins to see it from the bottom as survival, as that which creates life, that which maintains life, and it can and should move up in the energy system. So that is the first energy, and the second energy is that which is awareness itself. So there is the movement of awareness, which is prana, and then there is awareness itself. You can see that this is always a whole model of unity being that which is the only thing that exists. Awareness is the only thing that exists and is doing all of this. So those 2 energies, where awareness meets its own movement, its own mind, then it represents where we are, from where we are perceiving reality. How are we decoding reality? And so that's why you hear that there are people who are in their lower chakras, and I'll get to the separate self here, and people who have opened their heart and now are working from a higher frequency. This has also everything to do with frequencies. If you've heard this over and over again, those are the different frequencies in which we operate. And so we can see why everybody wants to elevate their Kundalini energy, and why everybody's talking about increasing their frequency and so on, because this is, we don't want to be in the lower states. These have a purpose, which is to create this experience of human being. The human being has a necessity for these energy centers to act the way they do. But they are not representative of who we are. And so we talk about awakening to yourself. So, all right, this is the energy system in a nutshell. We want to bring that energy, and in practical terms, it just means that our awareness wants to go into higher perspectives or perceptions of life, a higher awareness. That's also what it means. So let's talk about the different selves. And there is actually just one self, but that one self, which is awareness, as it perceives itself from the lower energy centers, it perceives itself to be separate. It seems to be an individual or a subject in a world, right? This is a belief that comes out of our perceptions, because our perceptions indicate us that we are limited in this space and moving through time, and so we believe that we are a separate self. Now, the whole purpose of elevating the energy of the Kundalini to the heart center, which is where the transcendent self resides, or is more real, the self that is more real is up here, is because we want to get, obviously, out of the belief, which is a wrong view of reality, that we are separate individuals. And certainly our whole world is based on this assumption. We all operate in a system, in a society that believes that this is what's true, that this is something that it's reserved only for certain people who have beliefs about spirituality and so on. But more and more we're finding that this is the truth. We are not separated. We're all connected into one field, and so there's a whole rabbit hole that goes there. But in any case, when we talk about elevating our energy or our prana through the Kundalini, that's what it means. We want to reach the heart, and there's a reason why we want to reach there, because the feeling of being in your true being is way better than the feeling that we have cultivated as being a separate being. Now, to move all of this, we have to obviously increase our awareness, you see? And so in this awareness, we have different ways. One thing that I want to talk about is how there are many ways in which this happens by accident. And of course, we want to do it purposely, willingly. We want to cultivate this environment in which we can see the energy flowing without any sudden experiences. But people are fascinated with these sudden experiences, and so we get into, for example, psychedelic experiences or mystical experiences which simply happen, or anything that is sudden, like, for example, a near-death experience can allow you to see from a higher perspective what's happening in the energy centers. And so that's why it's so mixed. All these experiences can be very mixed, with, of course, mixed results. But that's because we are coming out of this belief. Our mind is perceiving everything from a more holistic, I wouldn't say higher perspective, but from a more holistic perspective. And because we see it that way, we can have a slew of experiences. And they can range from the most chaotic and what they call a bad trip in psychedelics to magnificent and life-changing. And that's because we're looking at so many things that we weren't able to see before. And it depends on how we see it. It changes the perspective of anybody. So that's important to keep in mind, that these experiences can happen. But when they happen, it's only because something triggered. And that's why people say, I had a sudden Kundalini awakening. And like I said, people can They can go mad, and what we talk about, maybe just spreading the word and talking to people about this, or they can be diagnosed with psychosis. I've had a couple of people who were diagnosed with psychosis, and all they had was just a Kundalini awakening, or this sudden burst of awareness, expansion. And there are others who actually have had full-blown Kundalini awakening, and they simply integrate everything and say, oh, that's what it means. It means that, I am this and everything is, and so everything's fine. So, these are fascinating stories that we find, but in the end, no matter what happens, if we are on one side or the other, or if we've never had any of these experiences, this is what's happening right now. And so we want to cultivate this, like I said, in a way that is manageable. And that's why we have spiritual practices. So with that in mind, let's talk about the spiritual practices. There are two ways to approach awakening and to what we call enlightenment. Enlightenment is simply the shining or recognition of your shining being. That's one way to put it. You are what creates everything. Yourself is the one self that is creating everything. So we are independent creators of this reality, but being always, that's the paradox, it's always the one creator expressing itself through an individual being, which is us, and yet we are the creator. We are always creating our own reality. So much can be said about this, of course, but the point is that there are two ways that we usually have for cultivating and expanding this recognition or this path, which we call seeking, right? Spiritual seeking. I'm going to talk about the progressive path again, just an overview, and say that the progressive path is what's more, let's say, common, popular, and where most of the teachings come from. Because what we have realized is that there are ways in which we can grab anybody and cultivate that state of being, and so they can derive some benefits out of that. Now, the progressive path would give you a list of things to do, right? It will give you things that you should and shouldn't do, practices, maybe some visualizations and so on. All of these things are part of the progressive path. It gives you tools for you to change your experience into something more spiritual. And the purpose, of course, of the progressive path is to bring your awareness to its own nature. That's all it's doing. And so we have different methods, and they are useful for certain people. I find that most of the traditions, in fact, when we look at mysticism has always created some sort of teaching, which is the esoteric part of mysticism. And that esoteric teaching becomes more available to others, which then becomes the exoteric teaching, the outer layer of the teaching. And so those teachings, in the end, they can become, of course, religions, which are the majority of the people who follow it. And you can see why there are these layers of mysticism, or the transcendent path, which is seeking divinity. Because some people may not be ready even for a progressive path. All they need is just something to latch onto, so their spiritual needs are satisfied. And this is fine. That's why we need religion. Religion is the opening door for people to enter. But we know that, of course, a lot of people are dissatisfied with religion for several reasons, and so they seek something else. They either, like myself, completely ignore and avoid religion for all their lives, or we seek something that is the core, what's happening here. And so In the esoteric parts of the teachings, once you go past religion, then you find that there are methods, and those methods are the progressive path, in which, like I said, there are ways in which you're going to cultivate this environment, this inner environment, for you to begin to see more and more the transcendent unity in yourself, hopefully. And this has mixed results as usual, because there are many ways in which the self can get attached to practices and things. And so we talk about, like, for example, recovering Buddhists who have been in Buddhist practice for decades, and they still don't, they're still frustrated because they don't know what else to do. Couple this, of course, with the lack of fully developed, let's say, groups and gurus who can help and guide. We don't have a society that is built towards that, at least not modern society, and it becomes very tricky. However, the progressive path is something that is very, very useful, and it can be something that people can take to a degree, just like religion can be very useful for the people who have a certain need, just to feel that they have their spiritual needs satisfied. And that's fine, they're not missing on anything. It's only you who feel that you're missing something. So for a lot of people, there is this need for knowing, for diving to the depths of what is it that we're looking for in the spiritual path. Now, the direct path is the other way in which we can use the knowledge of unity in practical terms to live and cultivate that space. In the direct path, we're interested with direct experience. We want to know straight away what is it that we're looking for. And so, because we're talking about awareness, we go straight into the nature of our being. We say we know ourselves. And this is certainly what all mystics have said in the past: know yourself. If there is only one practice that they can give us, is know thyself. And so if that's all it takes, then everything should be there. And of course it is, because when we inquire into the nature of who we are, we begin to see that what we truly are cannot be explained. We cannot define ourselves, because we, the I, is what defines everything. It is pure identity. It is not identified, just like the I cannot see itself, then the I cannot identify itself. This recognition has the most profound and honestly infinite implications, because it turns out that that is the source of all creation. You fundamentally are the source of all creation. So the question is, how does that apply to my life? How does this branches out to all the different things that I want in spirituality? Because spirituality promises me that I'm going to become satisfied with myself, that I'm not going to keep seeking attachments and following desires that are impersonal, or rather personal. So, well, the knowledge of yourself, again, the progressive path has this capacity. It can lead us into that understanding, into that knowledge of ourselves. But in the direct path, we go straight into what awareness is. And you see, the purpose of this Kundalini rising is that we become more aligned with our true being. And our true being is something that, like I said, awareness is pure acceptance. We can define it as that too. Just like space is pure acceptance for objects, awareness is pure acceptance for everything. And so abiding in yourself produces the most important part of this whole energy system, because the transcendent self begins with unconditional love. Now, unconditional love means that pure acceptance. There is nothing that is rejected. And of course, it's not attaching to anything, because if it were to attach to something, then it would be conditional love. It is, there is a condition for me to love this. But no, the transcendent self does not. So what abiding in yourself does is to create acceptance, and you can see how this unblocks. There's a whole explanation here that we can get into about unblocking the energy centers, which is really what creates the space for the experience to always be channeled to the heart, because we no longer believe in this perception of separation, which is the separate self, the ego structure. And so the ego structure begins to crumble apart. And although the experience of the lower energy centers are still there, and they serve their purpose, which is to allow this experience to be in the physical, they no longer have a hold on ourselves as if it was our identity, because we already know who we are. We know straight away that we are that awareness which accepts and permeates everything. So everything else that is derived from here, which is the spiritual work, then can begin. So knowing yourself is the first step for any spiritual path. It is not the ultimate state, although of course we're talking about the transcendent state, which is awareness. Everything that exists is awareness. And so the first step is obviously know yourself, so you can begin to see life from a higher perspective and stop believing this, which is what's compressing us into a limited being, and it causes all struggles and suffering and frustration, dissatisfaction, and so on. By residing or abiding in our true selves, then we can move up to the higher energy centers, which is simply the spiritual work that we do, the individual creator that we are. We can only listen to the true self if we want to create an individuality that is obviously what we are here for, what makes us happy. And you realize also, this is another great point, that if your true self is pure love or pure acceptance, then the quality of being pure acceptance is joy. It's not the negative emotions that we have. So you can see how all of this is intertwined into just realizing what is it that you truly are. To answer that question, who am I? And to explore that ad infinitum, because there is no limits to all the things that you can begin to collapse as you understand that everything that you have is yourself, is your own creation. So the transcendent self is something that is the beginning of the spiritual path, and it must be understood now, always here and now. Now, the last thing I want to say is, why do I promote the direct path, or why do I use the direct path? And I gotta be honest, the first reason that I have is that it really was what opened my heart, my mind, everything. It cleared out any possible doubt that I still have or had at the time when I became aware of this method of investigation, of self-inquiry. It cleared out everything within months or weeks that I started exploring more and more this particular path. Much different than what I had, the confusion and chaotic mishmash of information that I had for a couple of years already gathering. It made out everything so much clearer. And because of that, I realized that if somebody like me could actually see this, then anybody else could see it even faster. Because for several reasons, I don't consider myself somebody who's spiritual. I don't consider myself somebody who has been on the path for decades. And I was just simply exposed to the right information. And I firmly believe that if you're here, you're not listening to this video because you're curious. You're listening to this video because you have had a strong calling from a point that is beyond what the majority of people are interested. And it's fine that they're interested in to a certain point because they're enjoying that. But there's still an itch in you that is that wants to know more beyond all the practices, beyond all the methods and all the approaches. It's just, what is that one knowledge that we need to cultivate in ourselves? And I firmly believe that if you're here and listening to this, of course, is because you are ready for this. You don't need a progressive path, although you can go back to any practice like I have done and enjoy it from there. But it's no longer a seeking. It's no longer something that I'm doing to achieve something. That's why I call this the end of seeking. It's no longer something that I'm going to achieve so I can be better. So that's why I promote the direct path so much. It worked for me. It'll work for anybody else. It is simple. It doesn't require anything that you need to do or that you need to know before. It simply requires that you have a very intense desire to know yourself. That's it. And then simply follow that desire to keep knowing yourself. Some people, like I said, they will be interested in, I don't want to use the word distracted, but maybe that's the right word, because they just enjoy doing certain things, and that's fine. But for some people, their calling is so deep that they go beyond that. And that beyond is straight to your being, to who you truly are. Now, that's all I wanted to share today, as I thought about the Kundalini being something that it begins with the acceptance of experience, with the view of reality from the point of pure awareness. And that's all that really exists, and that will inform your reality from a point of view that it's unexplainable really for anybody. It'll just harmonize your life in a way that you don't know how it happens. You just know that it happens because you see the results, and all you're doing is recognizing over and over again who you truly are. The rest is just the path that you're here to take. So that's all I got. Before I say goodbye, I've created a new Instagram for people who want to know more about my teachings and what I do. And I used to have a bilingual Instagram, which is still active, but I left it only for Spanish, and this English one is new. So if you follow me for whatever reason, go check my Instagram. If you follow me on Instagram already, then go check in my bios, in my profile. You can switch to the other account and follow me there. I have nothing else to share, but just thank you so much for watching, for being on this path with me, and with nothing else to say, I'll see you in the next video.